Okay, welcome back to the Founders Table. Today I'm joined by Melissa Fors Shackelford, Executive Marketing and Growth Leader, author, and Principal Consultant of Shackelford Strategies. Melissa has spent over 2 decades leading marketing strategy and growth across healthcare and technology. Today, through Shackelford Strategies, she advises CEOs, founders, executive teams on building purpose-driven brands that connect authentically and deliver measurable impact. She's also the author of the Amazon #1 bestseller, Harnessing Purpose, A Marketer's Guide to Inspiring Connection, a keynote speaker, and was recently named the top 50 women in healthcare 2025, which is, you have like a whole list of accomplishments, it seems like, Melissa. Your career is a powerful example, I think, in leadership and action. You've led strategy for some of the largest players in healthcare and technology, built award-winning marketing teams, advised mission-driven brands, and authored a best-selling book. So one, just congratulations on all of that. That is such an incredible feat. When I read it out, I'm like, man, this is insane. So thank you so much for jumping on. It really means a lot. Getting into like first question, I really want to know your background and motivation for everything. So what first motivated you to one, build a career at the intersection of like healthcare, technology, and marketing?
So first of all, thanks for that intro. That was super, super nice. And I appreciate that. So I'm really excited to chat with you today. And for me, I kind of started off in technology. Um, and I kind of fell in the back door of healthcare. So for me, I was really interested back in the day on a lot of startups and software companies, kind of started more on the tech side, and then came to actually to Optum on their data and technology side. It used to be called Ingenics, and now it's called Optum Insight. So that's kind of where I backdoored into healthcare because I came into really that technology side of a healthcare company. And so for me, all of a sudden, I realized that, wow, in healthcare, I can really feel good about what I do because I'm in marketing and communications and growth. I could work in any industry. And I'd worked for companies like 3M, and 3M's wonderful. We all love Post-it
Hmm.
notes and all their tech. But when I found working at Optum, yes, I didn't work in clinical care, but I felt so good about what I did that I was just like, yep, this is it. I'm going to stay here. And for me, what I learned being at Optum, I looked around at all my peers and they had this really, really deep healthcare experience. And I'd kind of fallen into healthcare, so I made some real deliberate choices in my
Uh-huh.
career so I could round out my healthcare background, my healthcare experience. And that's been really helpful to me. But I think you see a lot doesn't mean you always have to work for a nonprofit or a healthcare organization if you're a mission driven person. But for someone like me, it was just such a wonderful treat to say, wow, what I'm doing matters. And even though United Health Group is, Fortune 10 company, I felt like I was making a difference, and I really bought into the sort of North Star that we had, that we were making people live healthier lives.
I love that. And so my second question was actually obviously on the moment, was there a moment early on where you realized marketing could be more than just messaging? And I'm assuming that's was probably one of those moments for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you, I've always kind of been sort of that mission driven person and been in just the way I grew up. And then when I discovered that even in my job, I can make a difference, that was really important. And for me, I think I was always attracted to the marketing side and sales side of the world because I like working with customers. I just like working with
Hmm.
people and talking to people. And that's at its core, that's all marketing is. It's communicating one person with another, even if you're B2B. So for
Right.
me, that's really where it was. How do I find that wonderful purpose in my day-to-day job? And I can find that in marketing because marketing is such a profession where you're making a difference in people's lives one way or another. But
Hmm.
in healthcare in particular and mission-driven brands, for me, it all came together.
I love that. I definitely want to touch on marketing a little bit further up too. One thing with your experiences at, Optum and Evernorth and whatnot, do you feel like it really shaped your leadership today?
Oh, I I just consider it really a gift in my career. So I worked at some of those Fortune 100 companies, really grew up in Fortune 100s, and it sort of trained me that marketing is not just marketing for marketing's sake. Marketing is there to make revenue goals. And I think that was something I feel like was a gift to me early on in my career, because otherwise sometimes marketers come in and they're looked at as like the fluff, because which is
Hmm.
really unfortunate, because marketing is a revenue driver. But because of the places that I grew up in my career, I understood that it was all about, we had to prove ourselves, prove our ROI. We had to bring in the revenue. That was really important. I also worked at a very large national nonprofit called Hazelden Betty Ford, the nation's largest substance use disorder and mental health, a nonprofit, and also, an 800-pound gorilla in the nonprofit space, and really also found that I got all the learnings and training for those really big companies that now I bring to the small to mid-sized companies that I work with as a consultant. So
Hmm.
for me, I've been able to see how it works at the big guys, and now how can we translate all of those amazing things that I would be able to do with huge budgets, huge teams, bringing that to these smaller organizations that don't have huge budgets or huge teams. And frankly, with AI today,
Oh yeah.
kind of levels the playing field.
Yeah, absolutely. I love, and this is kind of a spontaneity question I just came up with, but on the marketing side of stuff, I feel like yes, a lot of people don't see a lot of the things that these larger organizations do that these smaller organizations do. So I think that's great that you're kind of helping transition that bridge as well, to help, like not necessarily smaller, or because and to anyone they're not small by any means, but in comparison as far as like organizations go, I think that's great that you're doing that, and people are starting to see like how there's not a disconnect there. Like you can connect the two based on the strategy that's done here and the strategies you can do here.
Exactly, exactly. And really, I think some of the more small to mid-sized companies are a lot more nimble as far as AI goes. So they're actually
Hmm.
going to be leapfrogging some of the larger companies who are just getting stuck in all of the red tape that they're putting around
Yeah,
AI. And marketing is I think, one of the sides of the organization that early on was able to adopt a lot of AI and continues to be very innovative, because you can flex a lot in marketing.
right. And so going into like, your strategies and like thought leadership, can you share like what you're focused on now through Shackelford Strategies and the types of like organizations that you typically advise?
It's really interesting to me, once I've kind of gone out on my own, kind of starting as a side gig and going into full time doing it, because I do a lot of speaking and podcasts and conferences and keynotes about being mission driven and focusing on purpose in your branding. A lot of those folks are, I think, who come to me just naturally, because mission driven people are attracted to other mission driven people. So I work with a lot of brands that are working to make a difference,
Hmm.
whether it's, most of them are healthcare or health tech kind of related that I work with just because of my background. But every single one of the founders or CEOs that I work with are extremely mission driven. They're out there to make a difference and change the world. So those are the kind of organizations that I work with. And most of the time, it's that they need a jump start in their marketing and their growth. So what I'm able to do is to bring in, really, like we just talked about, my big company experience, my experience with, huge marketing teams, huge budgets, and bring that to them and help implement similar strategies to achieve that growth that they need
Hmm.
on a much smaller budget and a much smaller team.
That's awesome. So one thing I'm thinking of as far as, people who, whether someone's getting into maybe building a brand or maybe when someone already has a brand, you've worked across startups, nonprofits, major healthcare systems. Is there like a common thread that you see in building brands that ultimately truly connect with people?
That's like the theme of my book. So actually, yes, absolutely, absolutely see a theme, and it's really where they're true to their North Star. So brands that know who they are and are very clear about it, they make better long-term connections with their customers as well as their employees. And in the healthcare side of the world, as well as a lot of other industries, but in healthcare in particularly, we're starving right now for staff. There's so much turnover. There's just that's really a struggle. And retaining great talent is important. So also
Hmm.
knowing your North Star to build connections with your customers, but you're with your staff so that you have an opportunity to keep and retain that staff long term. That's really, really important. But when they're very crisp on, here's what we stand for, this is what we this is our North Star, this is what we're marching toward, that's when those customers have a much, much deeper connection with those organizations.
Gotcha. And on the topic of staff, well, I want to save it for a little bit later because I do want to ask you some questions on like staffing and whatnot. Because I think that's, especially with people building brands, I think that's something that a lot of people lack on is finding good talent. And I think a lot of it comes from the pools that they can find good talent in, where they can
Mhm.
go find good talent. I think I would love to touch on this a little bit later from it. But your book, because you talked about it already, what inspired you to write it? What was the biggest, and I guess, yeah, what's been the biggest reaction from readers too?
So it was kind of on my bucket list for a while that I really wanted to do a book, and I just didn't quite know what to write about. A lot of the topics that I do a lot of writing and speaking about didn't feel like they would fit with a book. And then one day I was on a podcast just like this, and the host said to me, it was a marketing podcast, and he said he sees a lot of young marketers leaving the profession because they feel like they've sold their soul.
Mm,
And that's really easy to understand. Modern marketing is all about the data, and it's all about like all these different things to almost manipulate people. Think about yourself and the ads that you get served up, and you think, gosh, how did I buy that? Why did I buy that? And
uh-huh.
a good marketer was just pulling the strings behind the scenes. So I can see
Hmm.
how they feel that way. And what I told the host on this podcast, I said, that really has never been my experience in marketing, that I found marketing to be a profession that I find I get a lot of personal, just personal fulfillment because it's a team sport. You're always working with other people. And it's really about connecting with other people. Even though I've spent a lot of years in B2B brands, it's still B2B brands, they're still humans. And so for me, I find so much just personal fulfillment from marketing as a profession. And then that's kind of how the book started. It started as an article saying that really there's a lot of, I find personal fulfillment and purpose in marketing as a profession. And then it kind of evolved into how can I coach founders and CEOs and brand leaders to really bring that purpose through their marketing and their communications to build those stronger customer connections and stronger relationships with their staff. So
Right.
that's kind of how it came about. And so it was really the spark from a great conversation with a wonderful podcast host. And I tell you, the I've been so just wonderfully surprised by the reaction over and over. I've gotten all these amazing editorial reviews from actual reviewers, and they say great things about my book. And I know I'm not, the world's greatest writer, but they really, I was shocked. Like the first real review I read that from like an editorial review, and I thought, oh my God, they really read the book and they really understood it. And they said they can see how marketing can be a force for good. And I said, nailed it. And I was just
Hmm.
thrilled. And I tell you, I'm so excited every time it's won some small awards, and it's gotten, great Amazon reviews, but also these editorial reviews by people who really read it, and it resonates, and they understand that, yeah, marketing can get a bad rap. I mean, you've got
Uh-huh.
online gambling ads
Yeah.
constantly coming at you everywhere, and that's a whole different story. But marketing definitely can be a force for good.
100%. I definitely agree. I've been in marketing for quite some time as well, and I haven't got a chance to read your book, but I will absolutely pick it up. I'll link it within this podcast as well. That way people can go check it out. But one thing that stuck out with me is how you said, I know I'm not the best book writer in the world, but I think part of that, and maybe you can agree with me on this when it comes to marketing, I think what a lot of people crave is authenticity for
Yeah.
a lot of stuff because we're filled with so many gambling ads and all these different things. So even in marketing, when you're authentic, or for you being the sense how you're like, oh, I'm not the best book writer, but how you wrote it, because you're not quote unquote the best book writer, was so authentic that people were able to obtain the value from it, even more so than they would if it was just, I guess completely professionally written out. If you were the best book writer. And I think that's probably a incredible thing, that the authenticity in itself is what made people go like, this is something that's different.
Yeah. And Tony, this is why you and I are going to be friends. I 100% align with what you just said. I feel like people are craving authenticity, and they can spot
Hmm.
something that's not authentic from a mile away. And you see it all the time that their different brands get in the news because they had said they stand for something, and yet then they're doing something, or they've got some executive saying something that doesn't follow along those lines. And so customers and employees, they can spot that sort of performative activity from a mile away and they walk away. These days, people have so many choices. And with social media and online reviews, people find out when you're not being authentic and they're craving that and they're seeking. We know that, they say the data says Gen Z, but I think it's everybody really wants to work with brands that align with their values. So they're craving
Yeah.
that authenticity in a world of everything's AI.
Yeah, and again, this is another spontaneity question I just thought of, just on the topic of marketing, since it's I feel like it's easy to kind of come up with these questions on the spot too. One thing specifically on Gen Z that I had read a study on was that before in the past, a lot of people would obviously you get served an ad, you might click on the website, look at reviews, things like that, see how everything's set up, make sure it feels legit to you. But I read a study recently, and I'm curious your perspective on it. Is a lot of Gen Zers now are they're getting served an ad and they're actually not even clicking on the ad. They're actually doing their own research outside of the ad, which in a way is for marketers, like you have no way of tracking pixel data or whatnot, but like they going outside, they're looking at Amazon reviews or Reddit forums, or just they're spending so much more time finding it, where before it was like, well, let's limit as much friction as possible as a marketer. But it's almost like these, I guess what I saw was Gen Zers is that they're adding more friction because they really want to know that this is what it says it is.
That's amazing. That I love that. It's terrible for digital marketers. I'm sure they're pulling their hair out when they're seeing that, because
Absolutely.
that's the whole thing. We want to be able to track everything, and that's one of the beauties of modern marketing. But it really just shows that Gen Z as a population wants to be an informed consumer. And particularly because I work in healthcare, we know that people need to be informed consumers in healthcare in particular. And we want people to be doing all that research. The real digital marketers out there, they'll hate that, but and they'll find a way to start to track all of that behavior as well. But it's
Of course.
important, and it gives me hope for the future that Gen Z is really taking that into their own hands. That's great. I
Right.
love that study.
So going back onto just growth and transformation, you've led marketing through major healthcare mergers and integrations. What are some of the biggest lessons you could potentially share from some of those, I guess, quote unquote, high stake transitions?
What I'd say about, especially around the kind of mergers and acquisitions, because I have lived through so many of them from the marketing side in particular. I'll say what everybody else probably says too, is that if your people and your culture are not aligned with change, all the transformation is going to stall. So really, for me, it comes down to the people and the culture, that you need to work on building a strong culture that really has an appetite for change. And if you have that, you'll be able to do any sort of transformation, any sort of M&A activity. And it really does all come down to the people. The people are going to make it, or the people are going to break it. And from
Hmm.
the marketing communication standpoint, marketing can really help to bring people along the way. Marketing can bring the messages to your staff, to your customers, to your stakeholders, to your board, all throughout that process. So they can do a lot to sort of seed the market. They can bring people along. They can get them excited. So marketing is really, it's a critical partner in
Hmm.
all that sort of activity. But for me, it comes down to people and culture.
So, and that goes into my next question on like, what do you think builds like a great award-winning team? And I'm assuming your answer is going to be culture, but maybe there's something else on there too, or would you say culture is probably like number one thing these brands should focus on?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think it's culture when you talk about amazing teams. I have had some amazing marketing teams and leadership teams that I've worked on over the years. And I've worked on a few that weren't so great. And what's the difference? It really is. And culture, I will say, culture really has to start at the top. So
Hmm.
it's just like in a family, the kids start to model themselves on the parents' behavior. The staff will start to model themselves on the leader's behavior. And when you're holding your leaders to a very high standard, then you're also holding your staff to a very high standard. And for me, when I think about some of the best teams I've worked on, it's that we've built this really strong culture where we have psychological safety. And when you have that, you're willing and you were willing to take the chance to say the hard things. And if you're not willing to say the hard things because you're not feeling like you're in a safe environment, or you're going to get just torn apart for saying, this or that, you're going to stall all the innovation. So the best teams, I look back and I think, wow, like the word trust just jumps out, and psychological safety, which is really just trust amongst the team. But that's all built on the culture. And the culture for me always starts at the top.
Right.
When you don't have like strong leadership, or your leaders aren't walking the walk, they're talking the talk, the rest of it just kind of falls apart.
I 100% agree. I thought of this too on the marketing side, because I mean, being a marketer, obviously we could talk about this for hours if we wanted to. I feel like a lot of people do struggle with the balance of the creative side of marketing with the need for like data-driven ROI and like measurable impact. Um, how would you give advice on, I guess, balancing that?
Sometimes people ask me like the best advice I ever got from a boss, and I there's something along this. I'll just tell you just the quick story about it. I remember I was years ago, I had a boss, and I really wanted this promotion. And then so I said, what do I need to get this promotion? And she said, you're really good on the creative side of marketing. You're not as strong on the more analytical, the data side of marketing. And so I really took that to heart. And I, since then, really have driven harder to be a true data driven marketer, and really push my teams, even the creative folks, to be data driven. So for me, even if you were a creative writer or designer or whatever, one of those really critical marketing roles, you can still be data driven. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's how do you weave the two together. I remember just the beauty of offering some of these like SEO tools to one of our best copywriters. She was probably the best writer I've ever worked with. And she was thrilled to start. She said, yes, I would like to see how I can make my optimize my writing for SEO. And years ago, you would never have thought that, but it's like she was really excited about how do you integrate the two? How do you make it all data driven? So for me, it's not one or the other. It's that all of it needs to be data driven. And I feel like that's how marketing has gotten so much more respect in recent years, because marketing back in the day was about, do we use this picture or this picture? Is this red
Yep.
or blue? And now it's, well, the data shows this.
Right.
And the ROI is showing this, and so this is why we're making this decision or that decision. And that's where your CFOs of the world now are having much more respect for marketing, because they understand, well, marketing is just like finance. We're going by what the numbers tell us, and then we're seeing the results. So yeah, I think for me, all of that, my recommendation even to real young marketers, is to make sure you're balancing both sides, because every part of marketing these days should be data driven.
100%. And I think when you look at it too, on a logical sense, I feel like a lot of people sometimes they tend to forget with how businesses are built. They're still humans running the business, and there's still nothing's just kind of handed out in that aspect. So at the end of the day, like, to balance the creative side, but also understanding and balancing the data-driven side allows you to ensure that you're being a valuable asset to that business as well. So I love that. I think that's amazing. For purpose and like an inclusion, obviously you're a strong advocate for purpose-driven and inclusive marketing. What does that look like in practice for an organization trying to live those values?
First, let me just speak to the healthcare side, and then I'll just speak in general, because I think there's lessons there. But for healthcare in particular, everybody is a healthcare consumer. And whether it's today for yourself or for your loved one, everyone is a healthcare consumer. And there's nothing more precious to any of us than our health and our loved one's health. And so it's so important for us to really lean hard into accessibility and inclusivity in healthcare. It's the same for every other vertical too, but it's just, I think, really easy to understand in healthcare when we lean into accessibility. Well, people need to be able to get their healthcare information. So the website needs to be following all the accessibility standards. We need to be using the right font size, the right color contrast. We need to be using closed captioning, all the different things that are really, really table stakes. Same with from an inclusivity standpoint. People need to see themselves in the imagery. They need to feel that that in healthcare, we need to make sure we're writing things at a low enough grade level, because someone might be having a second language, or just not have as much knowledge of healthcare. So it's important from our imagery standpoint. It's important from our accessibility standpoint, because every single person is a healthcare consumer. And I think those are lessons for every industry, because why would you not? Why would you ever want to limit your potential audience to just this
Right.
sliver? Everyone needs to be thinking about the biggest available market. And when you think about making sure everything is inclusive and accessible, well, yes, then you're trying to say, listen, everyone is someone that we would like to speak to. And when you're closed captioning, then think
Hmm.
about the large percentage of the country that needs closed captioning. And then there's some that just want closed captioning because they don't want to turn their sound on. But
Right.
also just making sure you're using alt tags so that someone who's using a screen reader, for somebody who's got challenges with their vision. There's all these different things that it just opens up your audience so
Hmm.
much broader, that those are all modern marketing. Let's us make all that pretty easy.
Yeah.
So it's not only the right thing to do, but you're also not limiting your audience to people who
Right.
can either, read English as a first language, or, they fit the cookie cutter image that you've been using, things like that.
Yeah.
I think it's good business sense, but it's also the right thing to do.
Absolutely. And it's funny because we kind of already like we did this. We touched on authenticity earlier. We touched a little bit on inclusivity right now, and obviously it kind of tailored into my next
Mhm.
question, which we kind of already answered, which was like, what do you think what role do you think inclusivity and authenticity play in like the future of marketing, especially in like healthcare, which I feel like we kind of delve into because as you're whether you're established or you're growing as a business, no matter what, I feel like your marketing is always going to be adaptable to like the people that you're targeting today, because the people today are different than the people of yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that also leans into around AI, because I feel like inclusivity, accessibility, AI can help with a lot of that. But then when you have the authenticity, people sometimes can spot real AI generated
Hmm.
images or messages from a mile away. So we have to be kind of cautious. And that's where there's got to be a balance, particularly for people in marketing and communications, to be able to balance. How do you balance leveraging the speed and efficiency you get from AI that'll help you be more accessible and inclusive, but you also still need to be authentic. So there's a balance that we have to be cautious about. And in healthcare in particular, we know that there's a lot of folks who are not comfortable with the traditional healthcare uh,
Hmm.
establishment for whatever reason. So we need to be even more welcoming and even more authentic in our communications, so that they say, oh, yeah, I feel welcome. This is a company that wants to talk to me and seems like the door is open. So I'm comfortable to go and get care there. Same for any other industry. We want to make sure that the door is open for anyone who wants to buy from you.
Absolutely. And going into like advising leaders, how would you advise leaders who may struggle to align their business goals with their brand purpose? I feel like that's a common thing a lot of people are going through as well.
And for me, I I see a lot of brands kind of saying this, but when you and your team are aligned to your purpose, the business goals are just going to follow. There's
Mm.
all this data out there that shows purpose-driven brands outperform the competition. And I think there's a lot of just really easy, logical reasons for that. If all of your staff is aligned with your purpose and everybody knows this is our North Star, this is what we're going to change the world in this manner, well, then everybody's marching to the same drummer and everybody's going to be achieving the right goals. When your staff has no idea how what they do today impacts the ultimate growth and success of the company, then you're not all marching to the same drummer. And so
Hmm.
for me, it's just gone almost a no-brainer that you need to have everyone really aligned. And yeah, there's a ton of studies out there. There's Deloitte has one, E&Y has one. There's a bunch in Harvard Business Review. So there's a ton out there people can check out. But there's proof that purpose-driven brands outperform the competition. But also, when you think about the fact that your customers know exactly who you are, because
Hmm.
you are very clear on this is what we do, this is who we are. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to, feed the world. You can, or change the world just for your purpose. You don't have to be like Patagonia, who's going to save the planet. You could still be saying, okay, this is our North Star. It is to do this. But if
Hmm.
your customers are really clear on it, they know whether or not they want to buy from you, and your staff is aligned and they're going to be doing everything they can to achieve those goals. So for me, it needs to be together and needs to have that alignment, or they're not going to be successful.
I 100% agree. And it's funny because you answered my other question, which was on success ultimately comes down to the people that you have within your organization. So I was going to ask, how important is it to building the right team? And you obviously answered that well in with well enough information from it. But I'd like to go on the next one, which is, what's your approach to coaching and mentoring like marketing leaders so they grow while delivering results?
I love coaching and mentoring. I would say it's one of my favorite things. And if you had to ask me about, my North Star, a lot of what I get fulfillment from is helping others and growing other marketers or other leaders. So I've done formal and informal mentoring for a lot of people, and I like to. There's also, kind of the other angle was where you sponsor people and kind of help them grow in their careers. So for me, it's a lot about understanding who they are, what's their purpose, what gets them up every morning, gets them going, and then doing everything I can to make sure that they're happy and challenged. And so that's really my role as a leader, is always, how do I break down the roadblocks for them so that they can be happy and challenged and grow in their careers. And I feel so proud that I've got many, many people that I've worked with over the years that still come to me. And I feel like I have a little bit part, kind of little teeny part in their success, because I've been able to be a model for a lot of
Hmm.
people.
I love that. With speaking on like the people aspect, so like in today's competitive landscape, and you've already touched on too, like how competitive like the hiring and like turnover for healthcare is. Um, how do you go about with helping these people, like I guess attract and retain specifically, I guess like top marketing talent too?
And I think number one, it goes back to something we already talked about, is having a great leader, because
Mm,
all the data shows that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. And so
hmm.
having a great leader is really, really important. But also, I think you need to be flexible today in today's environment, because there are so many options, particularly, as you know, for marketers. Marketers, it's really easy to do a side hustle as a marketer. It's really easy to be a freelancer as a marketer. And that's where, honestly, sometimes different organizations need to lean into some things like that. But ul- for me, ultimately, when you want to have full-time talent, it's all about your leaders. If you have
Hmm.
leaders who are not about, kind of focused on, how do you grow their staff, how do you challenge them, and they're not going to stick around. I know that, especially, and the data shows that, with especially with the younger generations, they want to get that training. And marketing, I
Hmm.
think, is a one of the professions, there's others too, but where marketers, things change so fast that marketers need to get new training on what's the latest and greatest all the time. And so a good leader is going to say, yeah, I'm going to help you grow. But when something new comes out, I mean, a few years back, we would have never been talking about AI like we are.
I know, it's crazy.
So, are you going to give them training on AI? Are you going to give them training on the latest and greatest? Because now, back in the day, it was, how do I get on the top of Google search rank? And now you've got all the AI answers. So then, okay, how do I get into AI answers? There's so many, from a technical perspective, so much learning and training that people need to have. And then also on the creative side, there's so much also that people can, learn and grow. But it ultimately comes down to whoever that leader is. And sometimes your
Hmm.
model needs to be more flexible, and you need to pull in the freelance or the side gig folks as well, because that's really easy model in marketing.
Yeah, I think that goes back to just being data driven too, with whatever lets you accomplish your goals while fostering a great team. If that involves bringing in a freelancer or bringing in a
Mhm.
contractor, as long as it helps you hit the ultimate goal that you guys decided on. I'm curious, what do you think is the biggest bottleneck, I guess, in building teams that can both innovate and execute at scale?
We talked about it earlier. I think it comes down to culture. A lot of times your
Fair enough.
culture is going to be the reason why people don't have any innovation, because it's not a culture that embraces change. and you need to have a culture of trust so
Hmm.
that people are willing to throw out the crazy idea and say, well, what if we did this, or what if we did that? And that oftentimes for me, coming in as a consultant, sometimes because I'm outside lens, people will say, well, I always wanted to do this. And I can be the outsider and say, yeah, let's do that.
Right.
But if you have a culture where it's same old all the time, and you are not um, celebrated for bringing the new ideas, then it's a culture that's just going to stymie any change or innovation. So for me, it really comes down to that culture. And you brought that up earlier. It's, what is it, the saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I haven't heard that one in a while. Yeah, that's a great saying. One thing on like the culture thing I wanted to touch on too was that I feel like personally, because there's so many opportunities, especially for younger people with marketing skill sets and whatnot, that a lot of them might or are looking for that culture because it's easy. They can go to any position and job they want, but it's like finding something that gives them that purpose and value. I think is amazing. I don't think anyone's touched on it as honestly as much as you have on this call. So it's like I love that. I love it.
No, I think that also helps because I think as a marketer, speaking to a marketer, I think we understand that marketers in particular, kind of like you're an accountant, you could
Yeah.
work at a lot of places. You can do
Yep.
a lot of things in a lot of industries. So the question is, why are you at this place and why are you going to stay there? And are you going to grow in your career? Because
Right.
you're not going to be doing the exact same thing today as you are in 3 years or
Yeah.
a year, basically,
Uh-huh.
these days.
Looking ahead, if you had to point to one challenge that slows marketing transformation down, whether it's talent, whether it's budget, or the culture itself, what do you think it would be?
I would say it's the culture. I
Fair.
would say if it's a culture that's resistant to change, then there's going to be no innovation, really. And I've seen it. I've seen it over and over where and it really comes down, like we said earlier, culture starts at the top. And if it's a culture that's resistant to change, and it can be change on any level, but if it's resistant to change to the small things, they're going to be resistant to the innovation for the big things.
Right. And it's funny because I'm looking at this next question as we kind of wrap up here with these last couple ones. I feel like I already know your answer for this next question here. But as you look ahead into 2026, which is crazy to say that it's we're going into October of 2025. Crazy how the time
Yeah.
flies by. What's the biggest priority? Again, feel like I know your answer. What's the biggest priority you want to see for organizations that want to grow while staying true to their purpose?
I was trying to think of something wild and crazy I could say, but I would, if I picked one word, I would say alignment.
Okay.
But that's really having alignment with your purpose and your goals and making sure all of your whole organization knows. And this is kind of, strategy 101, but to make sure every single person knows how what they do on a day-to-day basis impacts the growth of the organization. And if everybody's aligned and following that North Star or their ultimate purpose of the organization, it's going to be successful.
Okay. And the final one that I have is finally for other leaders, marketers listening. They could be coming fresh out of universities. They could be coming fresh out of high school because we have a lot of people who learn a lot of marketing in high school, especially with the internet nowadays and YouTube and AI. I was very self-taught in marketing when I got started. Um, what's one piece of advice you'd leave them with about building brands that truly connect with people?
I think the biggest thing they can do is listen. And that's how you build that human connection. So if they're listening to their customers and they're listening to their stakeholders, for me, no matter what your role is, if you're a marketer, if you're a financial person, if you're an operations person, doesn't matter. If you listen to your stakeholders, you listen to your customers, then you're going to build that human connection and it's going to be successful. It's so funny that sometimes you get people and founders. I mean, because the founders table, you're talking to founders, they get kind of enamored with their product and they think, oh, it's just
Hmm.
all about this product, but they're not listening to their customers. So they may not, no customer may want to buy that product. So that's where leaning into that listening and focusing on the human connection is so important for every single role, but just incredibly important when you're a marketer or someone in communications, because you have to understand what your customer what is important to your customer, what they prioritize, in order to make sure that they want what you have and you're solving their problems.
I 100% agree with that. You reminded me of a quote that I heard a while back, and I always go back to it whenever any new marketing venture I do, and it's always that you don't know what the market wants. The market knows what the market wants. So it's like it goes back to that of like you could think you have the greatest thing new and you put it out there, and if no one is as interested in it, well, it doesn't mean you get rid of it, but you adapt it, you change it to make it something that is something that interesting to them.
Right, exactly. Oh, beautiful. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna absolutely use that going forward,
I
Tony.
love it. Put it on a t-shirt for me and I'll order it and we can exchange them that way. Anything else? I mean, you've already left them with a great message. Any socials they can find, anywhere you want to like plug yourself as far as like LinkedIn, your book, anything you want to leave off here before I kind of close us out?
Yeah, I love to connect with people and have conversations. And an easy way to find me is on LinkedIn, Melissa Fors Shackelford, or you can go to my website, melissaforsshackelford.com. And I love to connect with people. I love to have conversations just like this. And so that's where this is a wonderful conversation, I think, Tony, because when you have one marketer talking to another marketer, really what we do is we understand what customers need.
I 100% agree. And for anyone listening as well, know that Melissa came on this podcast from me reaching out on LinkedIn. So she is true. She does respond. She loves talking to people. Love when people reach out. So Melissa, thank you again for joining me, for sharing your story. It's been a very inspiring conversation, and I know our listeners will take a lot from your experience and insights. To everyone tuning in, thank you for listening to the Founders Table. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And for anything as far as Melissa, your links and everything, I'll throw all that in the description for them. But thank you again for listening, and we'll see everyone next time.